Okay, well, buongiorno.
Buongiorno.
Good morning, no, good morning, good afternoon, but it's early afternoon. And thank you all for coming. And as I said, I just thanked Mike and his wife, Nancy. Now, before I start my talk, can I have a show of hands of how many of you out here are Italian? Wow, that's good. Okay. How many of you have been to this area since before 1960?
You mean Albuquerque?
Well, Albuquerque, Rio Rancho, because more of the talk is going to be about Albuquerque, because that's what the part I know. So, when did most of you come? Those of you that are Italian, when did you come to the Rio Rancho area? What years?
2006.
2006.
2004, 2003.
Oh wow.
2007.
Whoa. Well, I think you're going to be surprised with some of the early Italian history of the Italians in Albuquerque. You may be very surprised to see how long they have been here, and it's such a rich history. I'm excited to be able to share it with you. So, my name is Lynne Franchini Peckinpaugh. I'm the eldest grandchild of Ovidio Franchini, who came to Albuquerque from Italy in 1904, and am the daughter of Oresti, better known as Rusty Franchini, who was born in Albuquerque in 1917. Now, I forgot to say when I was asking you guys questions, I was very excited to see someone that I have known here my whole life. But we go back, we're almost cousins. We have common cousins. Like she said, we're this close to being cousins, and that's Patty Marnie Newman. We have several of the same cousins, but we are not directly related. But I was so excited to see her because she's going to know a bunch of the people who are on the slides, and is going to bring back some memories for her too. So welcome, Patty. I was glad to see you. Now, to prepare for this talk, I read books on Italians in Albuquerque, read through several Il Giornalinos that were the monthly magazine from the Club Culturale Italiano, and the ones that I used were published in the 70s and 80s because they often did cover stories on the early Italian families who came, and that's where I got a lot of my information. I also had the pleasure of interviewing and talking to many of the direct descendants of these early Italian pioneers. It's been an incredible journey for me and one that I will always treasure. There's no way I could talk about all the early Italians in Albuquerque in an hour, so I am focusing on some of the main people who came around the turn of the century. So I apologize if I left someone out, and that's going to be probably some part of your family, Patty, but I couldn't cover everyone. I gave this talk initially at the Special Collections Library in Albuquerque in 2015, and I knew a lot of the people who were going to be in the audience, that I didn't have their family background there, and so at the end they're going, oh, you forgot so-and-so. I said, I know, but they'll be in something later on. So, I'll add that. Now, I might not have had all the stories straight. I was madly trying to take notes while I was interviewing some of the people. And that's one of the problems with oral history reports. But I'll be covering actual historical events and sprinkle in some stories that were told to me. Some questions and mysteries came up during my preparation, and I'll be telling you more about these as I go along. But I'm really excited to say I solved a couple of the mysteries that I had originally. So if I stumble around in my script, it's because I learned something different. I might forget and just keep reading. Now, I want to do all of my thank yous here at the beginning. So I'm including this picture of the book. How many of you are familiar with the Italians in Albuquerque book? It's here. Okay, great. I'd also like to thank my husband. He keeps coming to all my talks. He should probably know this by now, by heart. My husband, Dennis, over there.
He's not stupid, he is.
And also my son and daughter did a lot of work and helped me out. From long distance, they live in Vermont, South Texas, so they were helping me with the PowerPoint. And I have to, even though they're not here, thank all the people that opened their homes to me so that I could sit at their kitchen tables. We could talk, we could go, we went through countless old photos. And it just was all wonderful. And also to my fellow historians at the historic Albuquerque, and Diane Schaller, who's over there, she's videotaping this for me. So that would be good. She is the president of Historic Albuquerque. So thank you, Diane, for coming, and thank you for you and some of the other members who shared your photos and things with me. Now, the reason I wanted, besides the fact that it was an important book, Nicholas Chotolo wrote this book, and it's been a tremendous resource for me. I never met him when he came to Albuquerque to interview all of the people, because my mom was skeptical about what this young man was doing here. He was not from Albuquerque. What is his motive? So she wouldn't talk to him. And she convinced a couple of my aunts and uncles to not talk to them. But luckily, she didn't talk to my cousin Ketta Del Berger before she actually talked to Nicholas. So our family was included in the book, and some of the photos were included in the book. Now, I got brave, and I'm really excited to say that I actually called him up. I Googled him, and I found out that he's the curator for the cultural history at the New Jersey Museum, State Museum. So I talked to him for quite a while. I apologize that my mom wouldn't talk to him, because everybody I talked to said, oh, he was such a nice young man. So I wanted to let him know I was doing this, because in his dissertation he said it was so important for the third generation Italians to carry on the stories. And I wanted to tell him that's just what I was doing. As I read the books and articles and talked to all the people I interviewed, I started seeing common threads. They kept showing up time after time, and those of you, particularly the Italians, but many of the ethnic groups will probably associate with these common threads of family, pride, community, loyalty, support, religion, courage, and initiative. These threads started weaving through all of the stories, creating the fabric of the lives of the Italians in Albuquerque. Now, this quote I found in a book that was written in 1930. And the book was by Frederick Bohm, A History of Italians in New Mexico. And it was included in the end of the chapter on Albuquerque Italians. And it says, the colony of Albuquerque is not only the best, without equal, of the Intermountain region, but it's among the most intelligent, the most active, and the most homogeneous, and most loyal to its ideals Italian colony in America. Now, he might have exaggerated a little bit, but by the end of the talk, I'll see if you agree with him. Now, his name was Commendatore Zolfito Valentini, and he was writing for some reason about the Italians in the Intermountain region of the United States, which included Utah, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, and Nebraska. I hope that you will agree to some of the things that he says at the end. Now, more threads: courage, family, initiative. Now, why did people leave Italy in the first place? Before the unification of Italy in 1861, the peninsula was comprised of many states under a variety of rulers, leading to political and economical instability. According to Frederick Bohm, in that book that I just quoted from, the causes of immigration from Italy as a whole were numerous. The economic depression of the 1880s, the prevalence of malaria, the primitive state of agriculture, particularly in the South, and the lack of regular employment and the threat of military conscription. Now, what was required to come to America at that time? A ticket for passage, $50, a sponsor, and they had to pass a physical exam. Why'd they come to Albuquerque? The first Italians to come to New Mexico were the Neapolitan Jesuit missionaries in the 1860s. Archbishop Lamy, or Lamy as we usually say, requested that they come to Albuquerque to implement educational programs at San Felipe de Neri Church, which was the city's central Catholic church at the time. But it was the arrival of the railroad and the ability of work that drew many Italians to Albuquerque in the 1880s. Letters back home and word of mouth from family and friends were significant parts of the immigration to Albuquerque. Now, according to Judith Boyce Lamarck in the Immigrant Experience in Albuquerque from 1880 to 1920, she states, whereas in 1880, fewer than 1% of Albuquerque's foreign-born residents were Italian. In 1885, the percentage had grown to 8.5. The surge in the number of Italians indicated the beginnings of a trend that would eventually make the Italians the second largest group of immigrants, other than the Hispanics, to Albuquerque. The Germans were the first, the largest group. In 1900, Italians formed 9.3% of Albuquerque's foreign-born, yet in the whole United States, they only represented 4.7%. Now here's a map of Italy. While most Italian immigrants in the U.S. were by this time from southern Italy, New Mexico's Italian population through 1930 was almost entirely from the north. Italians from the vicinity of the city of Lucca, the region of Tuscany, the Italians heard about the immigrants' success in Albuquerque and decided to try their luck as well. Now, and many of you may know this, but Lucca,
it is next to your red little thing over there. That's where
oh,
Lucca
you can't
is.
see it.
No, you can't see it.
There you go. Now,
That's
okay, it's on the road, thank you. It's on the road from Florence to Pisa. And Lucca is right there in the middle. Now, here's a map. Oops, that's not the right thing. Here's a map of the Lucca area. How many of you are familiar with Lucca? Oh, wow. Are any of you from the Lucca area?
I lived in Tuscany for many years. And if you don't mind, I would like to interject something. Lucca is in Tuscany, as you justly said, but it's not north. It's not northern Italy.
No,
it's the mid-Italy.
It's kind of, yes, and that would, thank you, I appreciate that.
My pleasure.
But it was more north than many of the immigrants.
Oh,
That's
definitely. It
what-
was not near Naples. That's very
Okay,
true.
great, thank you. Now, I've circled some of the towns in red that these early Italians came from. Lomari, Marlia. This area is Fort Velasco. There was Uzzano, Montecatini. Now, where was your family? Do you know where yours
I
was?
am Venetian, but I lived in
Okay,
Tuscany
Venetian.
for
And
most
Patty,
of my
where,
life.
do you remember where your family? Further north. Okay. Now there was also Montecatini right here, and Borgo Abbigiano, where my grandmother Argia Benedetti Franchini was from, and then last but not least was Nuovo, which is where my grandfather Ovidio Franchini came from. Now you can see the towns were close. Of course, this was the 1800s. They didn't necessarily have cell phones, but they would write back to people. One would come, they would write back, and then they would help each other come here. Now, it was the custom for most of the families that the youngest daughter would stay back and take care of their parents. Now, when my husband was in the Army and we were stationed in Germany, I had the good fortune to be able to go down to Italy 4 times to meet my great aunt and cousins that were there. It was wonderful. And the great aunt that I went to visit, she was the youngest daughter who stayed back. Now, on the first trip that I made, one of my cousins took me to this little village in Villanova, which was kind of like a cul-de-sac, and there was a few houses around. And he was pointing to all the houses, and he was telling me the names. I couldn't believe it. I knew almost every single name of the people from that little village because every one of the families came to Albuquerque. It was unbelievable. They all came except for that youngest daughter who stayed back. And I met a couple of them also. Now, in my research, I found that John Stamble was a tinner or a tinsmith. He is the earliest one I could find coming here in 1860. left in 1870. And there was the Italian Jesuit priest arriving in Albuquerque in 1867. And some of you may have heard of Sister Blandina Segale. She's on the road to sainthood, I believe. I don't think she's finished that journey yet. But she arrived here in Albuquerque in 1880 and established St. Joseph's Hospital in 1900. Now, believe it or not, this man was an Italian, Joseph Barnett. And this is what I'm so excited because I'm going to have to kind of go beyond my notes because these were where I found out about the mysteries. And he was Italian, but he changed his name. In my talk, I say that I could not find his real name, his Italian name. Well, through more research, I found his great-nephew and great-niece. And the nephew, I know you will know this name, he was a doctor in Albuquerque, Ole Peloso, is Joseph Barnett's great-nephew. And so I went and interviewed him. He's just recently moved to Colorado Springs. But he told me, I finally solved the mystery. His Italian name was Pelletieri.
That's a big difference between Barnett and Pelletieri.
Yes, and I said, how in the world did he come up with the name Barnett? Well, the way he got to Albuquerque was he joined the circus. And somehow, well, he was born in Italy. When I first researched him, and my uncle, Frank Devoti, who is one of your relatives also, he told me about Joseph Barnett. And because his dad was one of his first chauffeurs when he came here. So he told me to find out things about him. And so when I did, I was finding stories that, one story said he was born in Italy, one story said he was born in New York, but they both said he was born in 1866, so that was good. Well, when I asked Dr. Peloso, he said he was born in Italy. So that mystery was solved. His dad came here first, and I think they had 5 children, and over time, he brought each of the children here. Or not to here to Albuquerque, but to America. But they couldn't take care of all the children, so they had to put them in foster homes. And Joseph Barnett was put into a foster home at a farm in St. Louis area. He did not like it there. He was not treated well. So at 12, he decided to run away from home and go west to see the Indians. So, according to Dr. Peloso, he had a small bag and his rifle, and he started walking from St. Louis. But somewhere along the way, and nobody knows for sure, is when he joined the circus and was able to get to the West. I don't know if he ever met any Indians on the way, but that's what he was trying to find. Now, he only had an elementary school education. He could hardly read or write when he came. He arrived in Albuquerque in 1883, and shortly after that opened the White Elephant Saloon, which he tore down during Prohibition, and built the Sunshine Building. If any of you are familiar with downtown Albuquerque on Central, the Sunshine Building, Joseph Barnett built that. He and his wife lived at the Alvarado Hotel, but they had no children. Now, there's a picture here of the Barnett Building that was across the street from this area, 2nd and Central. It was destroyed by fire in 1963, but the Sunshine Building is still standing. It was originally a movie theater. Now it's mainly used for concerts, offices, and housing. And Joseph Barnett was so interested in the motion pictures that he also owned the Crystal Theater and the State Theater before the Sunshine. He went on to develop Albuquerque's finer residential subdivisions and was one of the interested parties in building the Hilton Hotel, which is downtown. But now, what's the name of it? Now I can't think of what the name of it is.
Andalus?
Andalus, yes, the Andalus Hotel, downtown Albuquerque. He was thought to be one of the largest landholders in Albuquerque and was a prominent stockholder in the First National Bank when he died in 1954. And he did all of that with hardly any education beyond like 3rd grade, what we would say 3rd grade. Now, another man that people may not have heard about was Angelo DiTullio. He was an important builder during this early time in Albuquerque. I'm not sure exactly when he arrived, sometime around the turn of the century, but he was associated with building that Barnett building that I just showed you. But he was best known for his cast concrete, which was the precursor of cinder blocks, and it was sometimes called cast stone. Now, where he made those was downtown in Albuquerque, right where the Special Collections Library is, at Edith and Central. In fact, around the corner from that library, there is a building on Arno and Tijeras that you can actually see the cast stone outside. And it's being renovated, but we still haven't figured out what they're going to put there. Have you heard anything, Diane? But they're renovating it somehow. And then on the corner of where that library is, he built a house. It was first a grocery store. There's a house on the corner that's now in the historical records. And he built that for his daughter, Violet. She was widowed, and 2 of her children lived there until they died in 2006 and 2008. And he was the first person for really bringing motion pictures to Albuquerque. Now, he was also associated with building the Masonic Temple, which has been torn down in Albuquerque, and the gate at the historic Fairview Cemetery, which is on Yale in Albuquerque, close to Gibson and Yale, and the gate's still standing, so if you ever drive by there, you will know. But probably one of the most prominent early Italians was Oreste Mccakey, who was called the father of the Italian colony because he sponsored so many of the Italians to come here. His story is an incredible one. Born near Lucca, Italy, his father died shortly after he was born, and his mother passed away when he was 6. And he was placed in the care of his uncle. By the time he was 13, he was on his own, making his way to France, working in sugar beet factories, and then returned home to serve 3 years in the Italian army. After that time in the army, he traveled back to France, Cuba, and then to Veracruz, Mexico, where he started hearing stories about New Mexico, and he decided to come here. Arriving in Albuquerque in 1885, when he was only 25 years old, he opened a small tent saloon near the railroad tracks. Oh, there's another one of my friends. That's great. Oh, good, Mary Jo, I can add you into my talk, too. This is my friend from high school. So he opened this tent saloon down by the railroad, and within 4 years, he expanded to a wholesale liquor dealership called McGakey and Company, continuing to expand. And here's a photo of the Mccakey block. How did you manage to get here right when I was talking about the Mckakeys?
I don't know. I'm sorry I'm late.
No, that's okay, but you came at the perfect time. So I love this picture with the wagons, the horse-drawn wagons, and the Mccakey building. It was at the corner of First and Tijeras. Now, Oreste married Maria Franchini in 1890, and they had 7 children. I'll tell you more about Maria in a minute. But one of my favorite stories was when my great-uncle, Ettore Franchini, came to Albuquerque in 1898. He couldn't speak any English. He just went up to a policeman and he said, "Mccakey?" And the policeman pointed to where Mccakey's office was. He was very well known, but probably the most important thing he's known for is financing and planning the Kino Theater. I interviewed his granddaughter, who's now, I think, 103. I interviewed her when she was 100. And she told me that she agreed this was the most important thing that he did. Unfortunately, he died 2 years after the Kino was built. He died a year after this postcard was made. Now, I was really excited to see this. I was looking around in an antique store in the Highlands Center in Albuquerque, and I was looking through postcards, and I thought, oh, I'll just look at the ones from Italy. I did. I found this. Look at this. It was written by Oreste Mccakey, sent to Angelo DiTullio, that I just told you about, And look at the address.
Albuquerque, New
It's
Mexico.
just Albuquerque. It was 1911. Now somebody took the stamp,
Yeah.
but that's okay because I think I got the best treasure because I could not believe this. The people in the store probably wondered what in the world was wrong with me because I was so excited when I saw it. Now here's a photo of Maria Mccakey. Mary Jo. Met her, right?
I did. She
Yeah,
was
she was
terrified.
She was terrifying. Okay, well, I wanted to include her in this talk, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. She was a remarkable woman, a businesswoman in her own right. Now, remember the time that we were talking about. She ran the dry goods store, the Elms Hotel, the Savoy Hotel, all on her own. She loved to entertain, and I was told about the party she would have on January 6th, the traditional time for Italian children to receive gifts from La Befana, the Good Witch. She would give the children gifts at her home at Wellesley Southeast. Now the two-story home was in a walled compound that took up almost a whole block. The wall's still there, but the inside is a little different. Now I talked to her grandson, Oreste Puccini, who was 6 when his grandfather died, and Adelina, who was 12 when her grandfather died, his great-grandchildren, Louis Puccini, and great-granddaughter Annette Puccini, and they all told me a little bit about Maria. Now, here's how they describe the house. Mary Jo has been in the house, and so I'm going to see what you say about it. They told me it was big and fancy, and had a curved staircase, rugs and tapestries on the wall, and a swimming pool, thought to be the first one in Albuquerque, and it had reddish carpet. Does that sound right?
And the curtains were really heavy.
The curtains were
really heavy, and it could be quite dark.
She solved one of my other mysteries because I was trying to find people who had been in that home. Mary Jo and I have been friends since we went to high school a couple of years ago. And she has just retired and moved back to Albuquerque. And we were just talking, and I didn't realize it's because, okay, now tell me how come you knew the Mckakeys?
My godparents, my godfather was her son,
Yes.
Mario, and his wife, Ida Rossellini Mccakey, was my mother's best friend. Mario and my father were both drafted into World War II when they were 37, 38 years old. I mean, they were coming after women and children next. And because they were considerably older than most of the people that they served with, and they were from New Mexico, they hung out as much as they could. And my mother and Ida, who didn't have children, were camp followers, and they went to wherever their stations were, wherever their husbands were stationed in the U.S. together until they went to Europe. And then when the war was over and they both came back, and neither one of them thought they would, that friendship continued. And ultimately, my mother and Ida, they couldn't have children, decided they wanted to adopt. And I was the first of the babies picked out of the bin to be adopted. Then Ida and Mario adopted John, and later she had an opportunity to adopt another child and said, John's enough. So that's my brother. And we grew up together. And the swimming pool, I believe it was, I think I even knew that later. It was the first private swimming pool that anybody had in Albuquerque.
I'm
And
sure
we
Patty
go
knows
swimming
the
as
names too.
kids.
You went swimming, well, Oreste Mccakey, the grandson, told me that he used to try to impress the girls at parties and dive by standing on the wall and diving into the swimming pool. And I thought, oh my goodness. But he said one of his favorite stories was he was so afraid of driving with Maria because she used to use the white line down the middle of Central as her guide when she was driving her old Packard. He said he kept leaning off the side, being very scared about that. Now there's more common threads that I began to see. I told you about the earlier pioneers, but as others came shortly afterwards, they too made an impact on the city, and Nicholas Ciotola, who wrote the book on Italians in Albuquerque, stated, "The Italians, although not the first to capitalize on the new market for goods and services, were some of the most successful. Early Italians took advantage of the opportunities for free enterprise and, once successful, began to send for family members and friends in Italy." Now, look at some of these old businesses. Now, I know I'm watching Patty's face and she's smiling over there. So, these were just the grocery stores, the early grocery stores. Now, Albuquerque was ripe for business development. When these early Italian immigrants arrived, land was cheap and it was available, and many of the Italians were able to invest in land to build homes and start their businesses, enabling them to improve their economic status. Between 1900 and 1910, 36% of male Italian immigrants were proprietors or managers, including, earlier than this, 10 who owned grocery stores, 7 who were merchant tailors, and you'll see some more things. Most of the families, the sons, carried on the businesses. Now, I don't know how all these grocery stores made it, because they were on just about every corner of downtown. And Albuquerque was relatively small, but it seemed like there was a grocery store, Italian grocery, on each corner. This area was called Newtown because it was the new town by the railroad tracks. Now, my maiden name is Franchini, so I have to include the Franchini's grocery store in this. Patty remembers, we spent many hours at this grocery store. It was across the street from the McGakey building at First and Harris. This picture of the old store, it was, my grandfather started it, my dad and his brother, Ettore Franchini, and my dad and his brother and Ettore's sons continued the business on. My dad kept the store going until 1980 when he retired. But they had to move the store because Albuquerque was tearing down all of that area downtown to build the convention center. So my dad moved the store to University. But this old store that Patty and I remember with wonderful memories, one of the things was one of the biggest memories I have was when my cousins and I would all be at the store and we'd sort of be bored. So we would go into the back, and when there was a box of spaghetti open and locked where the spaghetti was, we would grab a handful of spaghetti, break it in little pieces, hide around in the back, and we had spaghetti wars. Oh, did you ever, were you in our spaghetti wars too? Oh, wonderful, Patty. And it was, gosh, my dad was not very happy with us because we had spaghetti all over the place, and I'm sure we had to sweep it up, but we had a great time there. That's fun. Now, the inside, the store down here, the inside is the original store, the inside of the original store that I really didn't know, but it was actually in that old Mccakey building across the street. And I know that it was there because my uncle, that's my uncle, Franchini. And this is the store that Patty and I remember very well. I don't know, were you ever down there at the store? And so my dad is back here, my grandfather here, my uncle. That's the store that we remember. Now, in 1951, I found this article of my grandfather on the right and my great uncle because they were featured. It was the oldest grocery store in town, and it was a monument to hard work of immigrants. Now, here's where I'm hoping this works. So, I interviewed a few people, and I've got some video clips. So, this is my aunt and uncle, Jeanette and Frank Devotee. Are they your aunt and uncle too, or just they're your cousins? And they both grew up in Albuquerque. I asked them what their earliest memories were, and what they have to say is one of my favorite stories. But I have to admit, it was the first time I tried to edit video clips, so I accidentally cut off the last few words my aunt said. So I'll tell you what she said. So I'm going to let you hear this. Great. Can you hear it?
Yeah.
They told me I didn't turn up the volume.
Sort of like vacant lot there.
Yeah.
And these people would come
I'm going to need help.
Cherokee, Torreon, and all those places and their wagons. And they would camp there. And you could see at night all the campfires and stuff that went on. And this went on up until the late 30s. I can remember that. And it was, I don't know how they put up with in those grocery stores.
But they were like friends.
They were great people and just fantastic, but they'd stay there a couple of days, 3 days, and they'd do all their shopping in the stores and the garages there, which people had with the businesses, had the restrooms and washrooms for them, you know. So.
And I remember many times my dad would bring some.
Whoops, that's where I cut it off. She said he would bring some of the families home, surprised my grandmother because he thought they really needed a good home-cooked meal and they would just appear at their house. So, but unfortunately, I cut that part off. Now, so many of the Italian grocery stores, especially in the businesses, they were known for their generosity. And, you know, even my dad, when he was down by the university, I can't tell you how many people came to me and have come to me and said that they survived because in college, because my dad let them carry their bill well past graduation. And they would pay $5, $2, whatever they could as they came. So I heard similar stories of generosity. Now, here's another long-running grocery store, which was the Champion Grocery, owned and operated by Alessandro and Amadeo Bertucci. It's located at 645 Harris Avenue South Northwest, on the same block as the Immaculate Conception Church and St. Mary's School. It's still standing, but now the family has donated the house, and it's now the Albuquerque Community Foundation. You need to go by and see it if you're ever down there, because on the sidewalk there's still a couple of the rings where the people used to tie their horses up. Now, they told me stories about generosity. They would open on Sunday mornings just so that the Italian families could come and get their supplies for Sunday dinner. But they also told me about a recent time when the sewer was being worked on next to the store, and Patty and Paul live across the street from the store, and Patty heard screaming, and she couldn't figure out what was happening. And the workers were all out there. They were digging up the street, and they found a pile of bones. So they called the authorities, and they were very upset. And she had to go out and tell them, don't worry, it was just where the butcher shop was. They used to bury the bones outside the store. Now, there were many bakeries, a few bakeries here also. One, as you see, was kind of run by, Union Bakery was run by Maria's nephew, and the Sanitary Bakery and Chiordi Bakery, Ciro Chiordi, became one of my great uncles. Now, I like this picture because I showed it to you already, but this woman and this woman are my great aunts. They were Franchini sisters. This man and this man became my great uncles. So I have to include that. Now, I really hoped there were more grocery stores than liquor stores and bars and saloons, but there wasn't. There was more liquor stores. And a lot of these closed, of course, during Prohibition. And then they kept the store, but they turned it into a grocery store. And then after Prohibition, some of them changed it back to liquor stores and saloons. And so I'm sure that at least a couple of you will recognize some of the names here. Now here's the inside of a couple, or outside and inside of a couple of the examples. The Puerto Rico, owned by the Bertuccis, and the Palms Beer Garden that was owned by the Del Frates. These were in the Old Town area. Now, here's a list of other kinds of businesses that they were involved in, and you look at this, it's a whole bunch of things. There was a milling company, a feed store, auto stores, different things that were all run by the Italians. Now, a couple of the one of the more well-known ones, these two businesses were carried on by the sons of the early pioneers. The Paris Shoe Store was on Central in the earlier days, then it moved to Nob Hill, then it went to Winrock. And that's where we bought all of our shoes, right?
Actually, they had, all three of those stores were running
At one time. Yes, it was pretty crazy. But one man that I interviewed, Pete Matucci, who you will see in one of the other clips, he told me about working for Paris Shoe Store when he was little, and he used to have to carry stacks and stacks of shoe boxes down Central because they would ship shoes to people all over the state. People would try them on. If they worked, if they fit, they kept them. If not, they mailed them back. But he used to talk about that. The other one was Super Service Station, owned and operated by Giulio and Americo Mccakey. Their sons carried on the business and even developed the Super Oil Company from that. Now, here's a slide of some of the restaurants. Now, believe it or not, more Greeks owned restaurants than Italians. The Italians had the grocery stores and the liquor stores. But these were a few of the grocery stores that are around. Now, this was one of the mysteries that I found out. This is the Pershing Cafe, which was named because the man, and I made a mistake, it was really Luigi Del Frate. There was a Louis Del Frate, a Luigi Del Frate, but I found out it was Luigi that was with Pasqualino Say. And Pasqualino was there in the apron. But the mystery I found was in those Il Giornalinos that I was reading from the 70s and the 80s, they kept talking about the Persian Cafe. I looked in city directories from 1915 to 1925. I could never find the Persian Cafe, but the Pershing Cafe was always there. So was it really a Persian restaurant? Nobody knows. I think it was just a miscommunication. And I heard stories that oftentimes, if they felt that people couldn't pay, they would just give them the food at times. Now, the theaters were the Italians were very involved in the theaters, and you can see all of these. The ones that are still in operation, the Sunshine Theater, the El Rey Theater, and the Chemo Theater. Now, they don't run movies all the time. They use them for other events, but early Italians in Albuquerque were very involved in the theater. Now, I thought this was kind of fun. All these stores, to include Franchini Brothers Grocery Store, were all on First Street, all owned by the different Italians. Now, more threads. And here's something that I have tried for years to recreate. Because back in the fall of 2015, I gave a talk at the New Mexico Historical Society. And I said, did Albuquerque ever have a Little Italy? You decide. Well, to me, it did. Patty, would you agree? You can see, look at all the names of the people on 2nd Street. My grandparents lived there. It was Little Italy to me. Everybody was speaking Italian. I interviewed people who are more from my generation that grew up in that neighborhood too, and the older generation all told me the same kind of stories. Besides hearing Italian speaking, they could hear Caruso from the Victrolas or playing the sound of horseshoes on Sunday afternoon, the smells of the Italian, it gives me goosebumps. I don't know if it's giving you goosebumps, but the smells of Italian food. Some of the old-timers didn't agree with me that it was Little Italy because they said, but it wasn't like the Little Italies in New York. And of course it wasn't. We didn't have the great influx of the immigrants. And but to me, it gave a sense of Little Italy. Just because when I went down there, I felt like I was in Italy. And we spent many, many hours in that neighborhood too. But you can see there were some on First Street, the majority on 2nd Street, some on 3rd Street, and 6th Street. There was some on 12th Street. There were some in the Bareilles area, which is in the southeast part of town. These are home addresses. Pardon me? Home addresses. These are all home addresses. All the homes. Now, these are the families. Now, I kept wanting to recreate this, so I borrowed some Sanborn maps of old Albuquerque, and I would bring them to the different people when I was interviewing, and I had different colored little Post-it notes, and I would say, can you remember who lived here? And they told me, and the stories that I heard were all just wonderful. So I was kind of able to recreate it a little bit. Now this house is one of the nicer, finer homes down. They were all beautiful homes. But this was the Domenici home. This was not Senator Domenici's home. It was his uncle. But the youngest daughter, who's in her 80s now, gave me that picture to use in this. Now, one of the reasons that I think the Italians were accepted so readily here in Albuquerque was that they shared the Catholic religion with the Hispanics that lived here. The languages were very close. In fact, the Italians, when they came, it was documented that most of them could speak Spanish within 6 months, English within 6 more months, and all of the kids, I mean, that was my dad's first language, probably your folks too. And so the second generation kind of picked up with that. But I think that's one reason that Albuquerque was so accepting. And even when I was doing this research, it gave me great pride, not only in the Italians, but pride in early Albuquerque because they were so welcoming. They allowed so much. Now, these are 2 wedding pictures. Of course, I have to include my grandparents, but this is my grandparents, my grandfather, Ovidio, and Ethne. They had a double wedding with his sister, Fine, and this is Sarah Piorti, the one that started the bakery. Now, this was and this is his brother, Ethne, and their 3 kids. This was in front of the building, was the McGakey apartments on 2nd Street. It was a whole series of apartments, and all of the Italians that came here first, most of them lived there first until they had enough money to move on. McGakey apartments on 2nd Street. That's why, as the houses became available, the families started moving down on 2nd Street. Now, anyone want to guess who the person is in the big hat? Maria. That's Maria Mccakey, and there's Oresti Mccakey. They were at the wedding. Now this picture I thought was in front of the Mccakey building also, and now I just found out it's actually in front of my uncle's house, Anthony Franchini's house. But this was the Domenicis, the ones who I showed you the home. This was their wedding picture, and it's just beautiful. It was on the cover of one of the Il Giorninos. Now, there were many organizations and activities. Now, I'm a little bit older than you are, but a year? Okay. Do you ever remember going to the Coloma Hall? Do you remember it?
Yes.
Mary Jo? I remember when we were little going to the Christmas parties there and weddings, the receptions. Yes, there was the inside of the hall. I asked another cousin, Donna, say Mullane, she said, yeah, I remember all the chairs were lined up on the sides of the walls. She remembered that. This is a picture from Armistice Day because there was a lot of pride. They were doing things. Now, the Colombo Society was founded by Oresti Mccakey in 1892. It had 62 charter members, and it was 416 North 2nd Street. Anthony Franchini, my uncle, lived right next door. The dues were $12 a year, and it was used for sickness and accident funds, which would, for decades, paid $1.50 a day for sickness and $150 for funeral expenses. By 1953, there were 150 members. Now, the Italian Women's Club was founded by Maria Mccakey and Agnes Dinelli in 1923. It was a charity group. They taught English to the young women who were coming from Italy. They sponsored fundraising events, and several of the people told me that when they were kids, they remember all of their moms crocheting during World War II. They would crochet squares, and they made afghans and raffled them off to buy supplies to make boxes for all of the young men, because all of the sons were in World War II. And they talked about remembering all the boxes down the Dominici house, down their dining room table, and how they would go through and put things in all of the boxes. Now, the Italianer Club was formed as the Italian American Club, formed in 1930. And most of that was the younger generation, the first and second generation. The younger of the first and second generation. Now, here's another one of the clips. Hopefully, Diane, if you can help me now. I had to turn the volume up on this. I may blast you out on this one, so I apologize. But George could not hear me, and I was by the speaker on the microphone. Now, one of the things I'm going to mention that kind of tugs at my heart. I did several different interviews. My aunt and uncle are still alive, and my cousin, who is with his mother in a film that a little clip you're going to see, they are still alive. In the last 3 years, every one of the people they interviewed has passed away. The most recent was Charlie Dominici, who passed away I think the end of 2017.
Yeah, just about.
Yeah. Okay. Hopefully. So, do you know which family was first to move on 2nd Street? Was Anthony Franchini one?
No. Franchini and McGakey were probably the first ones to move there.
I think it's probably right.
Probably.
There was a little hall right next door.
Right. Right.
And we lived right straight across the street.
Did you ever go to
They
Colombo
lived in
Hall?
that house that I showed you.
What did you do there?
What's that?
What did you do at Colombo Hall?
Just talk.
We had a poetry game in the basement.
Okay.
And then we'd have meetings, and then once a year at the Colombo Hall, and then there was a Telemark Club, and we had a dinner dance, and we used to have at one of the hotels. We'd had a dinner.
And those were very fancy, weren't they?
Yes. I don't
Everybody-
remember because I was still pretty young. The Telemark Club, I'd even forgot about it till you mentioned it just
Yeah,
now.
and the last year, just before I got drafted, I was the vice president of the club.
Really?
And the Telemark Club, if I remember right, was the younger Italian. The Telemark Club was the younger people.
Yeah, most of it. There was a few elderly ones, but most of them were younger.
Wow. What was younger? What were you in the
Under
20s?
30.
Okay.
Under 30.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
Okay, now, yes.
Introduce them. You didn't say who those two.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, thank you. It's George Dominici on the left, and he passed away about 1.5 years ago at the age of 96. And Charlie Dominici, they were brothers. Charlie was, of course, the younger one. And he owned Charlie Sporting Goods that's in Albuquerque for many years. Now, do I just go on with this? Yeah, good. Now, I found this picture in Il Giornalino of a reunion in 1946 and 1947. This is why I knew all the names in Mulinovo when I went to Italy, because all of these people came from that village, and they had a reunion. And of course, there's my grandfather and my great uncle, both with their ever-present cigars. But this is why I knew everybody from that village. Now I have a couple, like 3 little clips that are coming up, so is there a way I can do this? Oh wait, okay. Yay.
Did you ever go mushroom hunting with them?
Other activities in the Italians.
Even my kids know how to do that. You would teach them, and we don't call them fungi. Mushroom fungi.
Every year.
Special place,
Yeah, special places.
secret place. Okay, I had to cut it off there because I said secret places because I've always heard about there's these family rivalries of who gets to the mushrooms first. And she said, oh no, not secret places. And then she started going, oh, but then there was the blah, 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 and I knew that all those people were going to be in the audience when I first gave the talk, so I cut that part out. But the mushroom hunting actually still is a big thing. Did you ever?
There were Greek families that
Greek
together,
families
because
too.
my dad was Polish, and they all knew what these crazy mushrooms were. And a lot of those, at least stories that I heard, my brother went with them sometimes, up near Los Alamos. And
It's in the Hamas area.
Yeah, and Hamas and
I mean, I wouldn't suggest going out there and trying it yourself. You have to go with somebody that knows what they're doing. You still go? Oh, that's good. My mom was too scared. I didn't ever go. I was deprived. Now, here's a story that you may not know about, and I wanted to include. Because it's a story of how this community was so loyal to their new home and their old home and country. In 1927, a well-known pilot from Italy, Francesco DiPinetto, was flying across the U.S., and my uncle Ettore learned that he was going to make a refueling stop at Elephant Butte Lake. So Ettore gathered a group of all those Italians to go and have a welcoming party, which was surprised the pilot and everyone. So when the pilot took off to go to Arizona, they all left and came back to Albuquerque. By the time they got back to Albuquerque, word came through that the plane was destroyed at Roosevelt Lake in Arizona. No one was killed in that, but the plane was like a pontoon plane. It was on the lake. Someone carelessly threw a cigarette into the water, and it ignited the oil on top of the water and caught the plane on fire, and it sank. No one was killed or injured. But when my uncle found out about it, he was very a good entrepreneur. He said, oh, we'll get a party to go and recover the plane if you would give us some parts, if we could keep the plane here in Albuquerque. Well, they agreed that they could keep everything but the motors. So in recognition of this patriotic act, Ettore was knighted by the Italian government, and a picture was taken of him with the Italian government official, which he proudly displayed in his office until the day that he heard President Roosevelt on the radio saying that to support Mussolini was to support a fascist and a dictator. Ettore immediately went to his office, took the painting down, or the photograph down, and then resigned his position as the Italian consulate, showing his loyalty now to the new country. By the way, the family has loaned the propeller, and there's a big information plaque about it at the Albuquerque airport in the cavalcade of wings, right around the corner from the Delta desk. If you go and see it, there's this big propeller. That's from this plane, and that's part of the story. Now this story, I haven't actually been able to document. However, the same photo was found in all of these men's family photos. And their family all want to believe that this did happen. The story goes that the mafia advance men were on a train to Albuquerque to establish a presence here. So they convened and they met the alleged mafia members at the railroad station and let them know they were not welcome here. So now again, it's not been totally confirmed. I couldn't find anything in the newspapers, but they believe it was true. Okay, now let's see if I can work this out, because I've got a couple more little short clips, because you may not know about some of these things that were going on here in Albuquerque during World War II.
people, you know. They came, I know my
This is
dad.
my cousin,
was born in
Captain
Italy, and
Del
he used to
Frate. Her
come
mother
to-
was a Franchini.
Well, I have to tell you,
This is
this
her
is
son,
he
Guy.
was not a citizen during World War II. And we had a picture of Mussolini in our house. We had a shortwave radio, and we had shotguns and guns that my dad and brothers went hunting and stuff. And the FBI came and confiscated all of those things from us because my dad, they were not citizens. And then eventually they got them back. But because of the shortwave radio, they thought that they were communicating, you know, with the enemy or something. But it.
Now, I heard the same story from several of the other families, that this happened. And they did say that after the war, all of the things were returned to them, but how scary it was when they were little kids. Now, this might be something you didn't know. Did you know there was an Italian prisoner of war camp in Albuquerque? Okay, it had 165 prisoners, 36 guards. It was only here from October 15th to 1943 to March 23rd, 1944. Now, it was said that Clyde Tingley, who was the mayor at the time, agreed to have the Italian prisoner of war camp here because of the strong community of the Italian family. So this is another clip that my cousin Captain Del Frate, and again, remember her mom was a Franchini. She told this story.
And I don't know if you knew too that we had an Italian prison of war camp here. Did you know that? Yeah. I remember my mother taking, I used to play the piano, and my mother would take me, it was right close to our home, right here by the zoo, was the prison camp. And my mother would take me over there, and I'd play Santa Lucia on the piano. And then,
How old were you when you did that?
probably 7 or 8, 10,
Wow.
maybe very young. And then the guards were Italian, and she would invite them over for dinner. Whenever they had a day off or something, she'd have them over for dinner. And the Italian guards that would watch it.
Do you remember what the prison looked like?
The prison, they were barracks. Like, you know, those barracks you see, school barracks or whatever, they were barracks. I don't know how many they had there. There was quite a few prisoners.
Was there a big fence around
Yeah,
there?
there was. You know where the country club is? Right in front, there's that park in front. Right on that street is, that park is where the barracks were. Right in front of.
How did she get you in to play the
Oh,
piano?
I don't know. She probably had him in with the guards or something. I have no idea. I guess they would.
Of course she had them in with the guards. She had them for dinner all the time. When I was talking to some of the people, a couple of the older people that I interviewed said they think maybe some of the Italian prisoners came to dinner too. And so I'm sure that they probably did. And one of the Say daughters married one of the Italian prisoners. So, now, I think that's kind of a fascinating story that a lot of people don't know. Now, what happened to all these old neighborhoods? Urban renewal happened. It started in 1955, and by 1970, Central Albuquerque was on the cusp of further significant physical changes to be built. They tore all of these things down. Now, here's an aerial view of downtown Albuquerque. This is First Street. Remember all those stores that I told you, all the Italian stores? I think that corner was either that one or somewhere back here was my grandfather's store. This area with all the trees, that's 2nd and 3rd Street, where all those families lived. They tore all of that down to make the Civic Auditorium, the banks, and all of that. Now, I understand the reason for the growth, but it tears up my heart that all of that is gone. But though many of the neighborhoods are gone, and the buildings, the common threads of family, community, and pride still remain in the hearts of the Italians in Albuquerque. In the Italians in Albuquerque book, there's a quote from Carlos Vasquez, who's the Director of Research and Literary Arts at the National Hispanic Center. Cultural Center. And he said Italian immigrants living in Albuquerque, New Mexico accomplished in one generation what it took several generations in other parts of the United States. Remember that quote? Did he exaggerate?
No.
No? I don't think so either, thank you. That's it. Grazie.
Thank you.
Thank you.